Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's Connecting Conversation, where we are talking with Matt Casaban about involvement on a board of directors. So, thank you for being here, Matt.
Thank you for having me, Stephanie.
So, before we talk about the board in specific, can you tell me just a little bit about your background and what you do for a job now?
Absolutely. So, my name is Matt Casabon. I'm a United States Army veteran. I served overseas, one deployment to Bosnia, and then I started working in the nonprofit sector, working with OEF, OIF combat veterans and their families, helping with homelessness and housing, case management, program director. And then I got on the board for ClearPath New England in 2020, so pandemic era. And now I am currently the Director of Veteran Affairs at Quinsigamond Community College in Worcester, Massachusetts. And I've been there coming up on 3 years.
Awesome. Yeah, I actually joined the board of directors here in February 2020. And then when COVID hit in March, it really changed everything. I never even came on site here until about a year and a half after I had started my board involvement. So I guess to start, can you tell the students a little bit about what is ClearPath for Veterans in terms of not just services provided, but regions covered? Because I know you're multi-state.
Correct. So ClearPath New England, and that's specific because there's
Okay.
also ClearPath New York.
Okay.
ClearPath New England covers from Maine all the way down to Rhode Island and all the New England states. And it primarily focuses on holistic healing, and that is done through the provision of a service dog, and they also do a lot of family readiness groups as well as yoga. They have a fitness studio, barber shop. They do jujitsu, guitar with vets, a lot of holistic healing exercises, and they do peer-to-peer mentorship. There's just a tremendous amount of programs they offer, as well as retreats.
Mhm.
The list goes on and on.
Is it
But
is it the same services at each location, or does it kind of vary based on that location's space or needs from the veterans in those spaces? Like, is the Clear Path in Devon's, do all of the things that happen there happen at all of the other Clear Path locations as well?
no, so it's really specific to the region because you have different needs of veterans in rural Maine to urban Massachusetts. The needs are catered specifically to that population. So when we're looking at Maine, we think about reaching the veterans who are out in the areas where they might require Meals on Wheels and things like that, and in-home care, versus when we think about places in and around Devon's, Leominster, Fitchburg areas, we focus more on housing and how we can assist veterans with housing, whether it's specifically male housing or family housing. That's really depending on what the region requires, what the need of the veteran is.
But you're a board member for the whole New England Clear Path, or are you a board member for just Clear Path Devons?
So no, I sit on the board for ClearPath New England, and that, like I said, that covers from Maine to Rhode Island and all
Okay.
the New England states in between. And it's a little bit different than the New York board that just primarily focuses on New York, and they're in like rural New York, so their needs are very different than what our board oversees. However, we do share similarities, being the service dog programs that we offer. We are kind of mirroring what they do in New York because it's been so successful, at least with the service dog project. But no, I do sit on the board for all of New England, and I sit
Wow.
on the steering committee, excuse me, for ClearPath. And the steering committee is the vision for where ClearPath New England is headed. So whether or not the two ClearPaths come together, unite to become a national nonprofit, or if New England's going to branch off and specifically start targeting southern states on their own.
Yeah, fascinating. Okay, and you may or may not know the answer to this though. As a board member for ClearPath New England, are your finances for all of your locations in New England combined, or they must be broken up by state because of your state contracts? Or does your board have a subcommittee for finances so you don't have to get into all of that?
No, actually, that's part of our responsibilities. We oversee quarterly all the finances for ClearPath New England, and because we're located specifically in Massachusetts as the home base is, as we like to call it, we take those funds and we allocate them as needed, depending on what the needs are in that state for that group of veterans.
Okay, got it. So you've got a steering committee as part of your board responsibilities. You've got
Correct.
some financial oversight as part of your board responsibilities. What else do you all do?
So specifically, the board sits down and really looks at the vision and the mission of ClearPath. Are we staying along the lines of what the nonprofit was designed to do? Are we staying focused with veterans and providing the best services we can provide? We don't do the day-to-day operations. We don't oversee the program managers. We do hire and remove executive directors, presidents, and things like that. But really, it's about transparency and accountability for what ClearPath is doing. Are the funds being allocated to the right places? Is there something we can assist with, whether it's going out and receiving donors, working with local communities, being visible? So that way we're more than just the people behind the curtain, like in The Wizard of Oz. We're
Mhm.
actually seeing, we're visible, we're part of the community, and we want to know that the services that are being provided by ClearPath are actually what the community needs.
Okay, that's helpful. About how many folks are on your board and how do you all meet? What's your frequency? And I imagine you're online because you probably have people from multiple states.
So we have about 7 members currently. We're always putting more members on, but we do not really meet online. We are more of a face-to-face in person,
Oh.
including New York. So when we have a meeting between the two nonprofits, we come to them or they come to us, and we do the meetings in person. That's where we break the bread and butter and have those conversations about finances, the hard conversations,
Yeah.
what's working, what's not working. Have we reached out to the right politicians? Have we, checked all our boxes, crossed our T's and dots our I's? And that's all done in person. We offer the hybrid option for those who cannot come.
Mhm.
But since COVID, we really try to push these things in person because we lost so much of that face-to-face connection through
Mhm.
COVID. So
Yeah.
as well as we do offer it, we try to make sure that they're in person, unless it's the steering committee. And then because the steering committee is made up of Devens, ClearPath, and New York, those are online,
Mhm.
just because we're in two different places.
Yeah.
But most of the time, we try to meet at Devens in the boardroom.
How often?
So it's quarterly, every
Four
full
times?
month, and as often as we can. Other than that, I'd like to say there are pop-up meetings that, if we do have an urgent situation come up where we try to pull something together. If it's a funding issue or something like that, then, it may be sooner, but we try to do it at least quarterly.
That's interesting. It's actually really different than my board. I thought it would be much more expansive. So, for an example, for the students here at MBOC, we are headquartered in Gardner. All our properties are in Gardner and Winchendon, and we are, I would imagine, much smaller than ClearPath. We're 23 employees total, and I think you guys have 23 employees just on like SSVF grant alone. But my board of directors meets 10 times a year uh, in person. And right now we have 9 people on our board. We always try to have an odd number of people on the board because it helps with votes. And then some of our grants dictate the makeup of who has to be on our board. And so, for example, our GPD program, which is a 12-bed shelter program that's federally funded, mandates that I have a formerly homeless veteran or equivalent on the board. My SSG grant, which is another federal grant, indicates that a certain percentage of my board members have to be veterans. So our board is largely constructed based on the needs of our grants and also like who would be useful from the community, which I'm sure is the factor for you all, right? You try to strategically place people that have connections in the right places.
So that is typically the case. You normally want to serve on a board with something to offer that community as well.
Mhm.
It's not just like a grab and go situation. Typically, the board members are high profile individuals,
Mhm.
people who have connections within the political atmosphere, but also the local communities as well. But you can serve on a board or be picked to be serving on a board for passion alone, passion and commitment, because there's something to be said about that. If you believe in the mission and you are transparent and you can be held accountable, that you offer something besides, say, the financial aspects or the connections. You offer um, sincerity and
Yeah.
relatability to the people using the services.
Yeah, I think that's really important, especially in the human services facing nonprofits, right? So, my board of directors has a veteran who is now an accountant, but we also have a current city council member because that's really helpful to us. When I was originally asked to join the board, it's because at the time there were no other females on the board. So, even though I wasn't a veteran, I worked with veterans in my past job, and I brought a different perspective because I had worked with low income individuals and high risk individuals from my job at the college. So sourcing people that fill a niche that is useful to the organization, I think is really important. At ClearPath, whose responsibility is it to recruit more board members? Because I know here it is my responsibility.
So it's a collaborative issue.
Yeah.
We all come together and we try to propose new board members. And it's usually specific to what the board needs, whether it be a lawyer or, like you said, an accountant or
Mhm.
something within the government. But it's a collaborative effort where we all come together and we look for individuals in the community that,
Mhm.
we could possibly pull into ClearPath who offer something that we don't currently have, whether it's diversity or uh, more females. We're looking to bring more voices from in the veteran community, not veteran specific always,
Mhm.
because as you know, ClearPath New England was not started by veterans. It was started by Scott and Donna Bulger,
Mhm.
both civilians. So as long as you have the passion and commitment, I think that's really important. And I
Mhm.
think they do a great job with doing that and leading by example. But when it comes to the board again, and it's really what the community needs and what we are looking to do. So as we continue to grow throughout ClearPath New England, we're trying to pull in other board members from other states.
Yeah.
So, that's important because we don't necessarily have people in, like I said, Maine or Vermont or New Hampshire or Rhode Island. We have Massachusetts very well covered, but we don't know the needs of these other communities. So pulling veterans from that community to sit on the board is really helpful, helping us determine what we're going to provide and what their needs are, instead of just throwing things against the wall and seeing what's going to stick.
Yeah, it is really tough. I think one of the things folks don't realize is how hard it is to find qualified, appropriate board members that are going to work well with everybody else and the mission, especially in this area of the state. And I would say the same for Devon's too. When you're in Boston, there are extremely qualified and well-connected professionals on every block, right? But when you get into more rural communities, and especially with ClearPath in other states where it gets even more rural than this, it's hard to find people that are the right fit.
It
Um,
really is. It is a challenge. And that's, part of the steering committee and the advisory board's job is really to reach out and find these individuals. And that really is a challenge. Like you said, it's not like going into Boston where these qualified individuals are on every corner. You're really digging through the woods to try and find individuals who
Literally.
want to serve and be part of a mission, because that's really what you're doing. You're serving on the board, but you're really serving the mission of what that nonprofit is.
Yeah, it is. It's not as simple and straightforward as it may seem. Okay, so my next question would be, because you meet quarterly, what are the agendas for those meetings look like? What are your top things that you look to cover at that time?
So we start out going over the previous minutes of the last meeting, and then we typically go over financials for the past quarter, whether it's, like I said, past financials, and then we look at the projected financials as well. What grants are coming in, what federal monies would be coming in, what monies we're not going to be re-upping on, I guess you could say, because grants come and go, as you know, and determining which grants best suit where ClearPath is headed is part of that initial part of the meeting. And then meetings, the minutes are voted on and approved. And then the financial statements are gone over. They're gone over very carefully. Every dollar is counted for. And then it's really of, what can we do with the funds available now and where are we gonna head? Because that's really what we're always focusing on as a board member for ClearPath is where is this nonprofit headed? Are we
Mhm.
continuing the mission? Is the mission changing? Because things evolve, because the needs of the veteran community evolve. So that's something we take into uh, the process as well as, is the homeless grants, looking towards the future? Is it more the peer-to-peer mentorship? Is it the dog program? And that's really looked at during that time by the usage of the grant money. If we have a tremendous amount of extra funds available for the homeless population, then we go, all right, well, can we allocate these funds into something else unless it's very specific to that grant? But
Mhm.
as you know, ClearPath does their canteen
Yeah,
every Thursday, and that is growing significantly
it's
over the
huge.
time. And it's really a unique thing, and that it itself involves a considerable amount of time because it serves roughly 200 people every Thursday. It takes time to determine whether or not we can add more funds, if we have to add more chefs, if we have to add more space. And then really we look at the expansion, whether it's if we're moving into Lowell, Leominster, Billerica, Fitchburg, Gardner, we look at, what the next step is going to be. And if the homeless population is significant in that area, how can we best serve them?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I find important to point out to students is, when we talk about all of these crossover territories, right? MBOC crosses over a lot of territories with ClearPath. It's important to be clear that we are not all in competition with one another because we happen to serve the same population. We work super closely together. But that's intentional, and that's
Yeah,
not the case everywhere. We all happen to know each other and have different funding sources that work together. So when ClearPath says, we're looking at housing in Leominster, Fitchburg, and Gardner, sometimes that is giving us a call to
yeah,
say, what do you have? And sometimes that's giving us a call to say, what don't you have? And
right.
and so where can we put something? And that's a really interesting, I think, purpose of the board too, is to be mindful of territories and to make sure you're working well with others within those territories.
I think that's something that we've seen a change in. I know when I first started working in the nonprofit sector, it seemed like everybody was fighting over the pie, and there
Mm-hmm.
wasn't enough pieces of the pie. However, when I talk about pie, I'm talking about grants. That
Mm-hmm.
has significantly changed. I feel like whether it be generational or not, or just the network of who we are now works so well together. I think it's really unique to our area because, like you said, you don't see a lot of nonprofits working together. There is a lot of uh, replicated services and almost a waste of that funding because everybody's
Yeah.
repeating the same services in the same area. I think that's something that we've really seen change over and evolve over the last couple of years. And it's really unique to be part of because, again, when I first started working with nonprofits, that was not the case.
Yeah.
It was very much, I want the pie, I want the whole pie in regards to grant money. And I think that speaks highly of the people who are running the nonprofits. Uh, Yourself, for instance, and people like Bill Moore and Donna, we're coming together and working more closely together to provide the best services.
Yeah.
We each do something really excellent, and why replicate that if you can say, hey, ClearPath, I know you have a service dog program. That's not, what we do, and we know you do it well. We don't want to try to do that. And
Yeah.
I think that's important. I think when you look at retreats like Project New Hope, what Bill does, he really does an incredible job with the MST retreats and the PTSD retreats. It is his specialty, and he doesn't try, nobody else tries to replicate that. If somebody needs something, they reach out to that nonprofit because we're all friends, we all work closely together.
Yeah.
And it's not just a referral process like it used to be where you were sending things to an email. It's
Yeah.
now a lot more personal connection. And I think that's really important for nonprofits moving forward is people to have that person to person connection.
I agree, especially in a field where these are difficult things for people to ask for help with.
Mhm,
To ask for help with mental health and
mhm.
food insecurity and housing is really a challenge. And so when you just hand somebody an email and say, oh, call this organization, they can help you, it's not the same as saying, this is the person that I know there. tell them I sent you and you'll be taken care of. That's a really different energy. And I think it speaks well to the leadership in these areas and how carefully we've grown stuff. With that in mind, I have just a couple more questions because we're hitting our 20-minute mark here. Um, I assume your board is all unpaid volunteer, yes?
Correct.
Okay. Does your board have a fundraising requirement for each person?
It does not.
Yeah, ours doesn't either because everybody that lives in this region is broke anyway. Uh,
This is true. This
so,
is true. But we do have programs out there, like we do partner with safety insurance where you get discounts and a portion of that goes to ClearPath. So we do work with as many uh, businesses as possible to keep the corporate funding going.
mhm,
But as far as the board, there is no financial requirement.
yep,
It would be appreciated, I'm sure. But like you
mhm,
said, most of us are pretty broke in this region. So
yeah, it's not
no, there's
happening.
no financial requirement to be on the board.
But I will say for the class here to know, Matt and I are also members of the Fitchburg State University Alumni Board of Directors, and there is a fund or a donation requirement for that board, but it is a donation of any amount. You can donate $5 a year or $500 a year. The point of the donation on that board is so that when they apply for grants, they can say 100% of our board contributes to the organization, and that strengthens a grant application. So I brought that back to my board, and I usually say, look, I don't care what you donate. If you can donate either goods or $5 or $100, again, just so I can put on my grants that the board contributes in some sort of support way, it's helpful. So I
Absolutely.
think that that's interesting. And so my last question for you is because your board is fully volunteer um, constructed, when you have your quarterly meetings, do you bring paid employees from the organization, like the president or executive director, in to lead the meeting or present at the meeting or anything like that?
Actually, we do. We bring in the executive director or the president, depending on who's available at that time. And they
Mhm.
do present. They go over different programs that they've set up. Again, because they run independently, we just oversee the organization's mission.
Mhm.
They'll bring up all the programs that they're changing or bringing to the board with the possibility of reaching out for more funding. Whether it be a new program like Popcorn and Puppies that they want to receive funding for, or if it's a new cooking class that they did have deemed very valuable for families. But it is presented by the executive director typically, and that's usually in the middle of the meeting. We go over any possible new programs that they have in mind, and that's done because the people in the community have reached out to ClearPath and said there was a need for this, and then the executive director then brings that voice to the board.
Mhm. Good. Yeah, I think that that's important to note. So, if you're wondering about the construction of a board, so the board is all, for the most part, at any organization, volunteer based. The board as a whole is direct oversight for whoever the highest level paid employee at the organization is. And then that paid employee handles all the day-to-day stuff. So when I present to my board, unless I'm adding a new position or unless I've had to lay off a position, we don't talk about the day-to-day stuff. I don't, they can see it in the financials anyway,
Right.
down to what the utilities bill is. So there's no need to cover that. The board is really big picture only, and like you said, kind of guidance and steering.
Right.
With that, Matt, is there anything you've got to add? Anything I didn't ask that you think I should, or anything that might be important for folks to know if they've never had any experience with a board before?
I think when you are applying to be put on a board or you decide to get picked for a board, you want to go in with the right idea. You want to have a heartfelt connection to the mission. And you want to know that, throughout wherever it is your community, that you will be held accountable and that transparency and accountability is important because
Mhm.
you're a figurehead of an organization. And that's important because you carry around a certain level of responsibility with that.
Mhm.
So, with that being said, you do your best to cross T's, dot your I's, and mind your P's and Q's, but also know that you have to really have a passion for what that nonprofit or that organization is doing. It's not just something you sign up for to fluff a resume.
Yeah.
You want to give 100% to that cause and where that organization is going because your input is valued, and it has a trickle down effect. When a board is active and they're seen throughout the organization, that trickles down to everybody who's part of that, whether it's, the employees or the volunteers. When they see active board members, it really shows something and it says something. It shows that people who normally you don't interact with care about what they're doing, and it shows that you care about the mission.
I agree. And it makes a big difference to my staff when we run events here and the board shows up for it, because there were years where nobody showed up, and they didn't feel supported or care about. And those years often directly paralleled years where nobody got raises. Because when you show up and you know who the people are that you're supporting, you make really different decisions. So
Absolutely.
I really appreciate the insight that it isn't just a resume addition, and it is that too, but that's not the driving cause for it. That's a benefit of it.
It's a benefit, correct.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Matt. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on, Stephanie.
So you all will have, as usual, a few questions to answer in the discussion board that I've prompted you with, and then don't forget to respond to at least two of your classmates as well. And make sure your responses aren't just, "Hey, I really liked your response, thanks." Make sure your responses are a little more insightful from that. Right, Matt? You know the drill.
Absolutely. I know the drill.
All right. See you all next time. Thank you.
Thank you.